Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a time in life when you are shattered, your dreams broken, your strength tested, and your heart heavy with pain. You look around hoping someone will notice, that someone will ask, "Are you okay?" Let me tell you something, my dear friends. People are not heartless. They are just busy carrying their own pain. Everyone is carrying hidden pain. It's one of those universal truths we often forget while navigating the chaos of our own lives. We become so consumed with our struggles, our heartbreaks, and our unanswered prayers that we start believing we're alone in our suffering. But the truth is, pain is not exclusive. It wears 1,000 faces and walks beside every soul you pass on the street. That quiet man in the elevator who never looks up, he's probably fighting battles that would silence you if you knew them. The girl who always posts cheerful photos, always surrounded by friends, always smiling, she might cry herself to sleep every night. The colleague who never misses a deadline but avoids eye contact. Maybe he just buried a parent and hasn't figured out how to breathe again. We never really know what anyone else is carrying, and yet we expect them to carry us too. We assume people are cold when they don't check in. We label them selfish when they don't offer comfort. We accuse them of being distant, unaware that they might be barely holding themselves together. The truth is, life doesn't come with warning signs. People don't wear their pain like badges. They hide it beneath politeness, laughter, and even silence. And sometimes what looks like indifference is simply survival. This world has conditioned us to smile through the storm and pretend everything's fine. Vulnerability makes people uncomfortable, and so we all become actors on a stage, playing roles society expects of us. But behind every performance, there's a backstage filled with unspoken grief, fear, disappointment, and regret. And yet, because we can't see it, we forget it exists. We tend to measure other people's strength by how well they appear to cope. But that's a mistake. Just because someone isn't crying in front of you doesn't mean they aren't bleeding inside. Just because they show up every day doesn't mean they're okay. They might be doing it because they don't have the luxury to fall apart. They might be showing up for their children, for their parents, for someone who relies on them more than they rely on themselves. And so, when we go around sharing our problems, expecting others to instantly understand or fix us, we overlook the reality that they, too, are looking for healing. Maybe they don't say it out loud, but they are tired. Maybe they don't collapse in public, but they are broken. Not all wounds scream. Some whisper, some hide. Some wait patiently for a quiet moment to unravel. It's easy to believe that your pain is heavier than theirs. After all, you feel yours so deeply. But compassion begins when you start recognizing that others are also carrying invisible weights. Their silence is not ignorance, it's often exhaustion. Their distance is not rejection. It's often a sign of someone retreating into themselves because they don't know how to ask for help either. Sometimes, the kindest thing someone can do for you is simply surviving their own life. Expecting them to carry your sorrow when they're buried under their own isn't fair. And that's where understanding begins. Not in words, but in the awareness that we're all walking wounded, trying to make sense of this life, one moment at a time. Stop expecting others to understand your struggles. No matter how close someone is to you, no matter how deeply they love you, or how often they listen, there will always be a part of your journey that remains invisible to them. It's not because they don't care. It's because they simply can't feel your pain the way you do. They haven't lived your moments, stood in your shoes, or carried the weight that pressed down on your chest at midnight when you couldn't breathe. Struggles are deeply personal. They're felt in ways that words often fail to capture. You might sit across from someone, pouring your heart out, hoping they will grasp the depths of what you're going through. But when they offer a solution too quickly, change the subject, or even just nod in silence, it can feel like a dismissal, and that hurts. But it's important to understand they are responding from their perspective, not from within your experience. They interpret your struggle through the lens of their own life, which may have no resemblance to yours. That's not their fault. It's just how human understanding works. We often set ourselves up for disappointment by expecting empathy to equal experience. But empathy, as powerful as it is, still has its limits. Someone can sit beside you in your darkest hour and still not feel the darkness the way you do. They might try to comfort you, offer kind words, or even cry with you. But when the night ends, they return to their own world, one where your pain is only a shadow of what it is in yours. And when you expect them to completely understand, you put a burden on them that they were never built to carry. It's natural to want to be understood. We all long for that one person who just gets it. But the deeper truth is that full understanding is rare, maybe even impossible, because even when someone has walked a similar path, their journey was still their own. Their reactions, their emotions, their decisions, they were shaped by a different heart, a different mind, and a different history. Two people can live through the same storm and come out with entirely different scars. When you realize this, you begin to release the need for validation. You stop trying to explain your broken pieces to people who were never meant to fix you. You stop exhausting yourself, waiting for someone to say, "Why understand?" in the exact way you hope they will. You accept that your struggles are not meant to be understood by everyone. Some of them are just meant to be endured, survived, and transformed within you. Sometimes we keep telling people about our struggles, hoping they will say the magic words that will heal us. But healing doesn't come from others understanding your pain. It comes from you accepting it, feeling it, and choosing to rise above it, regardless of who is or isn't cheering you on. When you tie your peace to the understanding of others, you make it fragile. Because people forget, people misunderstand, and people move on. You stop waiting for someone to validate your experience, and instead, you begin to honor it yourself. Not all "how are you" mean they care. It's one of those phrases that gets tossed around casually like a greeting, not a genuine inquiry. People say it out of habit, out of politeness, or just to fill the silence. It rarely comes from a place of deep concern. Most of the time, they don't even pause long enough to hear your answer. It's become a formality, an empty ritual, one that doesn't require honesty and doesn't invite vulnerability. You've probably experienced it. Someone walks by, smiles, says, "Hey, how are you?" And before you can respond, they're already 10 steps ahead. You're left there, wondering whether you should have answered truthfully or just mirrored their energy and moved on. So you smile, nod, and say, "I'm good," even when everything inside you feels like it's falling apart. That moment becomes another reminder that the world doesn't really want your truth. It wants your politeness. People aren't always ready for the weight behind your answer. They aren't prepared for the truth when it's heavy or messy. They expect you to say you're fine to keep things light, to keep the flow of conversation smooth. It's not because they're heartless. It's just that most people are overwhelmed with their own chaos. They ask out of routine, not readiness. And when someone does take the risk of replying honestly, "I'm struggling, I'm exhausted," or "I'm not okay," the air often gets awkward. The response is usually something hurried, uncertain, or dismissive, not because they don't care at all, but because they don't know what to do with that truth. This is where emotional fatigue enters the picture. We live in a fast-paced world, constantly overstimulated, endlessly distracted. The capacity to hold space for someone else's pain is becoming rare. Deep conversations are now seen as too intense, too dramatic, or too inconvenient. And so the question, "How are you?" becomes diluted, stripped of its intention. It becomes a social script, not a bridge to connection. We start adapting to that culture. We stop telling the truth. We give rehearsed answers. We learn to wear our smiles like armor. We convince ourselves that no one wants to hear about our struggles, and often we're right. Because when people ask how you are, what they usually mean is, "Tell me you're okay so we can keep moving." And so we learn to bury our truth beneath phrases like "I'm hanging in there," or "just tired," because even that feels like too much for some to hold. But this doesn't mean no one cares. There are rare souls who ask that question and truly mean it. They look you in the eye, they wait, they listen. But they are not common, and they cannot be expected in every encounter. If you rely on every "how are you" to be a doorway to empathy, you'll end up disappointed over and over again. Recognizing the difference between routine concern and real compassion protects you. It teaches you not to open your heart every time someone knocks. It helps you save your energy, your story, and your vulnerability for those who have earned it. It allows you to stop mistaking politeness for presence. Because genuine care shows itself not just in the question, but in the silence that follows, the kind of silence that says, "I'm here, you can be real with me." Healing begins with self-reflection, not validation. It's natural to want others to see your pain, to understand what you're going through, to acknowledge your suffering. We seek comfort in the eyes of others, hoping they'll nod in agreement, hoping their empathy will make our wounds sting a little less. But real healing doesn't come from being understood by someone else. It comes from sitting alone with your own truth and deciding to face it without turning away. Validation is momentary. It soothes the surface but rarely touches the core. You might feel better for a moment when someone tells you, "You're right," or "That must have been so hard." But when the noise fades and the room is quiet again, that pain is still there. You realize that no amount of external affirmation can mend what you refuse to examine within. Healing asks for your attention. It asks you to stop running. It asks you to be honest with yourself about what hurts, why it hurts, and what you've been avoiding. There's a difference between telling your story for healing and telling it for validation. When you seek healing, you dig deep. You ask the hard questions. You don't just talk about what happened. You explore how it changed you, what it taught you, what it's still teaching you. But when you seek validation, you tell the version of the story that invites agreement, that wins sympathy, that keeps you safe from judgment. One path leads to growth, the other leads to cycles. Self-reflection is uncomfortable. It asks you to look at your own choices, your patterns, your triggers. It holds up a mirror, not to shame you, but to show you where you need to grow. It whispers things that others are too polite to say. It brings up memories you thought you'd buried. But it also brings you closer to your true self. It's in those quiet, honest moments that you start to see yourself clearly, not as the victim, not as the hero, just as a human being trying to find peace in a world that doesn't stop spinning. When you stop chasing validation, you stop performing. You stop editing your pain to make it palatable. Was deep up editing your paintable. You begin to feel everything fully without the need to explain it away. And in that space, something shifts. You begin to hold yourself with the same compassion you are waiting for from others. You begin to realize that healing isn't about forgetting or pretending. It's about accepting. Accepting. Not everything has to be justified. Not every wound needs a witness. Some pain is yours to sit with, to learn from, to grow through. People can walk beside you on your healing journey, but they can't walk it for you. They can hold your hand, offer you warmth, and listen to your silence. But the steps must be yours. The work must be yours. And it begins with reflection, turning inward instead of outward. Not to isolate yourself, but to reconnect with the strength you forgot you had. It's easy to seek distractions when you're hurting. It's easy to scroll endlessly, to talk endlessly, to search endlessly for someone who will make it all make sense. But healing doesn't come from noise. It comes from the stillness you've been avoiding. It comes from asking yourself, what do I need right now? And answering honestly, even if the truth is difficult. It comes from being willing to grow through the ache instead of numbing it or outsourcing it. Problems are lessons in disguise. They don't show up wrapped in clarity or comfort. They arrive like uninvited guests, loud, disruptive, and often overwhelming. When they come, they don't knock. They break the door open and leave you standing in the ruins of everything you thought you had under control. And in that moment, it's hard to see anything but the chaos. It's hard to imagine that something meaningful could emerge from something so painful. But with time, if you choose to look closely, you begin to notice that every challenge carries within it the seed of transformation. Life doesn't hand you problems to punish you. It hands them to you to shape you, to reveal parts of yourself you didn't know existed. Strength you didn't think you had. Patience you didn't believe you could master. Wisdom you weren't ready to receive. And the thing about lessons is that they don't always come with explanations. Sometimes they just come with silence, with waiting, with falling and getting up again. Over and over, until something finally shifts inside you. You learn the most about yourself in the moments you wish had never happened. Not when things are easy, but when everything feels uncertain. When nothing makes sense, that's when the deeper learning begins. You start to pay attention in a way you never did before. You listen to yourself more closely. You begin to question, to explore, to feel more deeply. Pain cracks you open, but it also creates space for awareness, for growth, for change. Every problem carries a mirror. It reflects back to you what needs healing, what needs letting go, what needs attention. Sometimes it's a relationship that reveals your patterns. Sometimes it's failure that shows you where you tied your worth. Sometimes it's loss that teaches you the value of presence. And sometimes it's the problem itself that teaches you how to rise. Not by fixing it immediately, but by learning to carry it differently. We are often so focused on escaping discomfort that we miss the message buried in the mess. We want answers, but we don't want the silence that helps us find them. We want growth, but we resist the soil of struggle that helps us bloom. We want change, but not the discomfort that precedes it. But problems don't exist to destroy you. They exist to refine you, to strip away the layers that no longer serve you, to challenge the stories you've been telling yourself, to break the illusion of control so you can learn surrender, acceptance, and trust. Some lessons are loud and obvious, others are quiet and subtle. You might not even realize what a problem taught you until years later, when you're stronger, wiser, and far removed from the situation. You'll look back and think, that almost broke me, but it built me too. And that's the hidden beauty of every difficulty. It leaves something behind if you're willing to receive it. The key is to stop asking, oh, why is this happening to me? And start asking, oh, what is this trying to teach me? That shift in perspective changes everything. It turns you from a victim of your circumstances into a student of your life. It gives you the courage to walk through the fire knowing there's something on the other side. Not always relief, but always growth. Not always answers, but always meaning. Because no problem comes without purpose, even if the purpose takes time to understand. Scars don't need explanation, only transformation. They are the silent evidence of the battles you've fought and the wounds you've survived. They don't speak in words, but they carry stories. Stories of pain, of resilience, of growth. And yet, in a world obsessed with perfection, we often feel the need to explain them, to justify why we are the way we are, to make others understand the reasons behind our fears, our boundaries, our silences. But the truth is, you don't owe anyone an explanation for the way you've healed. Scars are not signs of weakness. They are symbols of survival. They mean you were hurt, but you didn't give up. They mean something tried to break you but failed. And still, when people see those scars, emotional or physical, they often make assumptions. They try to define you by your damage instead of your recovery. They want to know the story, but not always with the intention to understand. Sometimes just out of curiosity, sometimes to judge, sometimes to offer pity instead of respect. But you were not shaped by pity. You were shaped by endurance. You were shaped by the quiet strength it took to keep going when everything inside you said stop. You were shaped by the moments you wiped your own tears because no one else was there to do it for you. Your scars are not open invitations for scrutiny. They are not explanations for your worth. They are a part of your story, but they are not the whole of who you are. You don't have the reel of your pain just to make others feel comfortable. But don't have to shrink your story to fit into someone else's understanding. Some things you've lived through are too deep, too sacred, too complex to explain. And that's okay. Healing doesn't always come with clarity. It comes with acceptance, with learning to carry your past without needing to unpack it for every passerby. Transformation happens when you stop trying to hide your scars and start embracing them as part of your becoming. When you realize that they don't make you less, they make you more aware, more compassionate, more human. It happens when you understand that pain doesn't have to define you, but it can shape you into someone wiser, kinder, and more courageous. The world will try to tell you to cover your scars, and to edit your truth, to pretend you were never broken. But healing isn't about pretending. It's about rising while still holding the evidence of where you've been. It's about walking into the world without shame, knowing that every scar tells a story of strength. Some people won't understand your journey, and that's fine. Some will misread your silence, your walls, your boundaries, not knowing they were built out of necessity, not pride. But transformation is not for them to see. It's for you to feel. It's in the peace you start to find within. It's in the way you respond to life differently. It's in the way you choose not to bleed on others just because you were once wounded. You don't have to carry your pain in ways that constantly demand explanation. You're allowed to move forward without justifying every tear, every choice, every scar. You're allowed to transform your hurt into something higher, into strength, into wisdom, into art, into silence, into light. The power was never in proving your pain to others. The power was always in what you did with it once you survived. Not everyone deserves access to your vulnerability. In a world that encourages us to be open, to share, to speak our truth, it becomes easy to forget that our truth is sacred. Vulnerability is powerful, but it is also delicate. It is not meant to be placed in every hand that reaches for it, because not every hand knows how to hold it gently. Gently. Not every person has the capacity to respect what you reveal. And when you offer your softness to those who haven't earned it, you risk being misunderstood, dismissed, or even hurt again. There is a difference between being authentic and being exposed. Authenticity is rooted in strength, in knowing who you are and being unafraid to live it. Exposure is what happens when you give the most fragile parts of yourself to people who haven't shown the maturity to honor them. You don't have to tell your story to everyone to prove that you've healed. Healing is deeply personal, and so is the decision to let someone in. We often mistake connection for closeness. We think that just because someone asks, they deserve to know. We believe that just because someone listens, they care. But curiosity is not the same as compassion. Some people just want a glimpse into your life, not to support you, but to compare, to gossip, or to feel better about their own circumstances. And when you realize that your vulnerability was not met with the kindness it deserved, it stings. It makes you want to retreat, to build walls, to never open up again. But protecting your heart is not the same as hiding it. It's wisdom. It's self-respect. It's choosing discernment over desperation. You can be kind without being naive. You can be open without being an open book. Every chapter of your life is not meant for public reading. Ding. Some pages are only for you. Some are only for the few people who have proven that they can sit with your silence and your storms, not just your sunshine. Boundaries are not barriers. They are filters. They allow love in and keep harm out. They let you decide who gets to hear your story, who gets to see your scars, and who has earned the right to stand beside you in your vulnerability. You are not being cold when you protect your space. You are not being rude when you say no. You are not being selfish when you choose your peace over pleasing others. There's a quiet strength in keeping certain parts of yourself sacred, in not needing to overshare to feel seen, in understanding that true connection doesn't come from how much you reveal. It comes from who you become when you feel safe enough to be real. And safety isn't found in everyone. It's rare. It's earned. It's built slowly through consistency, respect, and presence. Your softness is not weakness. It is your power. But even power needs protection. Just like you wouldn't hand a priceless gift to someone who doesn't recognize its value, you shouldn't hand your vulnerability to someone who hasn't shown they can be trusted with it. And trust is not built through words. It's built through action, through time, through how someone shows up when you're at your lowest, not just when you're shining. You are allowed to guard the most intimate parts of your story without apology. You are allowed to say, this part is not for you. You are allowed to heal quietly, to protect your peace fiercely, and to share your truth selectively. Not out of fear, but out of love for yourself, for your journey, for the strength it took to survive and the courage it takes to keep going. The most powerful transformation happens in silence, not in the noise of applause, not in the validation of others, not in the spotlight, but in the quiet spaces where no one is watching. That's where the real work begins. It's where you confront your fears, not to impress anyone, but to free yourself. It's where you let go, where you reflect, where you rebuild from within. Silence isn't empty. It's full of answers that the noise of the world often drowns out. We've been taught that progress should be visible, that healing should come with grand gestures, and that growth must be shared to be real. But there is a kind of evolution that happens away from the eyes of others when you stop performing strength and start actually building it. There is a version of you that's forming in the solitude. The version that doesn't need approval to feel worthy, that doesn't seek recognition to know they've come far. That version isn't born through external praise, but through internal reckoning. You don't always need to announce your healing. No. Sometimes it's sacred. Sometimes it's too tender to put into words. There are battles you fight in silence because explaining them would only dilute their meaning. And there is power in keeping those battles close to your chest, letting them shape you slowly, letting them teach you what noise never could. The silence allows you to listen to your soul without interference, without opinions, without expectations. In silence, you find clarity. You begin to distinguish between the voice of your fear and the voice of your truth. You begin to understand that not every thought deserves your attention and not every emotion requires a reaction. Stillness teaches you patience. It teaches you how to breathe through discomfort rather than escape it. It teaches you that it's okay. not to have answers, that sometimes growth looks like confusion, uncertainty, and messiness. Transformation is not always beautiful. It's often lonely, it's often uncomfortable. It's filled with doubt and resistance, and the kind of pain that doesn't translate well into language. But that doesn't make it any less real. In fact, it makes it even more real, because it's not for show, it's for you. You're not pretending to be okay. You're not packaging your pain to make it digestible. You're sitting with it, learning from it, letting it refine you instead of define you. And when you emerge from that silence, even if no one else notices the change, you will. You'll feel it in the way you no longer react to what used to break you. You'll feel it in the boundaries you now protect with quiet confidence. You'll feel it in the peace that replaces the need to prove anything. That's the kind of transformation that lasts, not the one that seeks to be seen, but the one that is rooted in truth. You don't need an audience to evolve. You don't need a platform to grow. You just need presence. You need honesty. You need to be willing to sit with the parts of yourself that feel uncomfortable and unfamiliar and love them anyway. Growth doesn't always announce itself with breakthroughs and turning points. Sometimes it's in the subtle shifts, the softened edges, the deepened breath. Sometimes it's in the way you start showing up for yourself in moments when no one else is around. The world might not celebrate your silent victories, but those are the ones that change everything. They're the ones that build resilience, that deepen your wisdom, that align you with who you're becoming. Because the most profound growth is not about becoming someone new for the world. It's about returning to yourself, piece by piece, and remembering who you were before the world told you who to be.